They captured these guys straight away and they brought them into the town for interrogation. I believe that his clothes were so ragged they didn't even know they had a priest. It was when they found the oils and the crucifix then they realised they had a priest. Which priest it was, they did not know. He was half hanged in snow. He was still conscious. They brought him down here. They had a barrel of pitch and they sliced his head off. This is where it happened here. The next day after the burning, they brought the ashes down here to the Mullan, which is the old cemetery here for Tullow. This is the Glen of Mal. This is what you call the Ruairc country.
The Wicklow country?
Ruairc country.
That's a crappy grave.
It's a crappy grave, yeah. This is the area where the rebels would have camped here in 1798.
How's it going, lads? So in today's video we're going to be covering some 1798 rebellion history. I was kindly brought up to North Carlow and West Wicklow by Irish historian Colum Ruairc. If you don't know Colum, he runs the 1798 rebellion casualty database. I'll leave a link to it below. He's also the author of these two books, They Died for Ireland, The Republican Dead, Volume 1, which is 1916 to 1919, and Volume 2, which is 1920. I only found out yesterday that there's actually some copies of this book left. I ordered this book last year to make sure I could get my hands on one. I reckon these are going to be collector's items in years to come, lads. There's nothing like them out there. They're incredibly written, and even some of the pictures in these books you're never going to see anywhere else, really. I'm going to leave Colum's email here if you want to reach out to him and pick up one of these books before they're sold out, because as I said, there's a limited number of copies printed, and once they're gone, they're probably gone, so I'd highly recommend picking up one of these while you still can. In this video we're going to be covering a few topics. The first one is Father Murphy, so we're going to be looking at where he was captured, where he was interrogated, where he was killed, where some of his ashes were buried, and also we're going to see his vestments in Tullow Museum. Then we're going to cover some Michael Dwyer history. We're going to see the area where the siege of Derry-na-Muck took place. We're also going to see the graveyard where Sam McAllister is buried, and much more. Hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks again to Colum for taking me out for the day.
So, in here is where O'Toole's lived. This is where Father Murphy's journey ended, basically. After the Battle of Vinegar Hill, the rebel force divided just outside Ferrycarroll, outside Wexford town. What happened was the largest force went up along the Wexford coast towards the Wicklow Mountains. A smaller force, led by Miles Byrne and Father John Murphy, went west up through the Blackstairs Mountains, up through Kilkenny and towards the Laois border. And they realised their effort was futile. They made an attempt to, they were going to break into the Midlands. When they realised there was a large force congregating around them, they basically chased back down to South Wexford, where they camped upon Kilcumney Hill, just outside Borris. On the morning of the 26th of June 1798, a large force of soldiers under General Charles Askill came from Kilkenny and opened up a large fusillade on top of the hill, dispersing the rebels. On that date, there was a massacre in South Carlow. Thomas Cloney recalls a lot of it in his memoirs. They reckon about 50 people, innocent people, were butchered by the government forces. The rebels under Miles Byrne got back into Wexford through the Sculla Gap, and he eventually joined up with the other rebel column on White Heaps, near which is the mountain just outside Arklow on the Wexford-Wicklow border. Father Murphy and his comrade James Gallagher from Tumahurra, outside Enniscorthy, they broke away from the rebels. They believe, the local folklore is that they were dispersed and lost from their friends, but I believe he was coming up here to meet Bishop Daniel Delaney here in Tullow. So his journey brought him up along the East Carlow, the Blackstairs region of Carlow, where he had relative security amongst people he would have known from punching excursions, and relatives also that lived along the Blackstairs, the Wicklow Carlow borderland. So he came up along and he received much generosity from many families from the night of the 26th of June right up until the 1st of July, when he came here to the O'Toole's. And O'Toole told Father Murphy and Gallagher to go and use the hay shed as a place to sleep. While they were asleep, yeomanry from Tullow, of which one of them was Owen MacNab, came here to get horses from O'Toole. And O'Toole, knowing that, probably fearing who was in the shed, basically said the best horses are in the shed. the yeomanry went in, they saw that the horses had their shoes turned the opposite way, which meant that it was impossible for trackers to know what way these guys were going. And they went into the hay shed and they found Father Murphy and James Gallagher asleep. They didn't know that they had Father Murphy. They didn't know who he was, but because he was asleep in the shed and because the horseshoes were turned the opposite way, they captured these guys straight away and they brought them into the town for interrogation. So that's the site of his capture.
So the old barn and house
is
out here.
There. You can see that. You can see the indent in the field there. That's probably where the houses were. Still, the houses would have been here. I'd say they probably just dug out of the ground to get rid of all the stonework.
Say there would have been right here?
I'd say it would have been right here, yeah.
After the yeomanry captured Father John Murphy and James Gallagher at O'Toole's farmstead, they brought them into Tullow town for interrogation by Major Hall.
This is where Father Murphy was brought to. He was interrogated here by Major Hall, who originally came from County Armagh, I believe, or County Down. They brought him here. They severely beat him and Gallagher, and they found on his possession holy oils and a crucifix. I believe that his clothes were so ragged they didn't even know they had a priest. It was when they found the oils and the crucifix then they realised they had a priest. Which priest it was, they did not know. We know that he did not reveal his identification because for a good year afterwards the newspapers just referred to the incident here as the execution of the Popish priest in Tullow. They didn't have his name, and for about 2 years after they didn't really know that they had Father Murphy. It was only afterwards to see in newspaper reports the execution of Father John Murphy of Ruairc, the Popish priest, the rebel leader, the priests, and so forth. In the 1870s, Father Calvin released a book about the insurrection in County Wexford, which is basically a nationalist rewrite of the 1798 rebellion, which basically cut out the United Irishmen and made out the rebellion as a people's fight against anarchy or against the crown. And it was led by Catholic priests, Father John Murphy, Father Moe Cairns, Father Michael Murphy, and so forth. They're the prominent priest leaders of Wexford. But they only ever held the rank of captain. You know, they were probably over companies. You know,
yeah.
There was no real structure in the sense of in the rebel army in Wexford, but they had they would have been over the parishes that they came from. They didn't actually lead the Wexford rebellion in Wexford. That was actually led by a Protestant man by the name of Bagnall Harvey. He gave up after the Battle of Ross and after the massacre of Scull of Oak, and he was taken over. It was taken over by Edward Roach, and then Philip Roach took over the south of Wexford. Father Philip Roach. He was executed on Wexford Bridge just after the fall of Wexford. So many people were executed in 98, it's unbelievable. To remember all of this, I have it all compartmentalized. When he was brought here, this is where he was interrogated.
So at the time of Father Murphy's interrogation and his execution, they didn't actually realise who they had?
No, they knew he was a priest. They knew there was something suspicious about him because, as we mentioned earlier, the horseshoes turned around and the horses sort of hiding from somebody, didn't want them tracked. They looked famished. Their clothes were slightly ragged and repaired. When on their journey up from Morris, they stopped in the house of O'Connell. Their original O'Connell actually repaired some of his clothes, so they could see that the stitching was still fresh. So who are these guys? They were hiding from somebody, and if the fact that he was carrying priests' oils, he was definitely involved in the rebellion. So that's when he executed him. But basically, having on his possession oils and crucifix was enough to execute him. That's the memorial. It was put up in 1905. The memorial, interestingly, recalls John Gallagher. Incorrectly calls him John Gallagher. His name is actually James Gallagher. That was his trusted bodyguard, as they call him. But he actually came from the district of where Father Murphy came from, down in Timcurry, just outside Ferns, on the banks of the River Slaney. So he's actually looking south towards Wexford. He's also looking down towards the River Slaney, and he was born on the banks of Slaney in 1753. Father Murphy's an interesting character. He was born into would have been a middle class Catholic family. He was encouraged by the Bishop of Wexford to enter the priesthood. At that time, Catholics who wanted to become priests couldn't study in Ireland because of the penal laws. So he went to Spain. He got his qualifications in Seville, the Irish College in Seville, and he came back. Then he was curate of Wicklow. He wasn't parish priest. He was curate, and parish priests actually remained neutral, borderline neutral, and pro-loyal. A lot of Catholic priests in Wexford were quite loyalist, and Father Murphy appears to have kept his head down. He encouraged the flock in March and April of 1788 to give up their weapons. It was only after the news of what was occurring at Dunlavin and Newcastle, and seeing that the yeomen were indiscriminately burning out people's houses, they themselves were also paranoid. They were burning out the locals, and what happened was the locals were coming to Father Murphy for solace and for a bit of a what to do, basically, what we want to do. And so he basically, the famous saying attributed to him was, "We'd rather die like men in the field than be butchered like dogs in the ditches." Right. I don't know if that's actually a nationalist quote that was basically conjured up in the 19th century or not, because there's very little written evidence about Father Murphy, and there's very little about the veterans. There's very little from veterans in the 1820s that talk about him. So it's basically just folklore that we have to build up the story of Father Murphy. When they captured Father Murphy, they interrogated him. Basically he faced a gruesome execution. What happened was he was brought out, he was half hanged in small. He was still conscious. They brought him down here. They had a barrel of pitch, and they sliced his head off. And his head was brought just down the street here. I'll bring you down there shortly. But they burned his body here, the remains of his body here. They ordered the occupants to open the windows and to allow the smoke from the remains purify their house, because he was a Catholic priest. So they were ordered to open up all the windows while smoke of Father Murphy filled the house.
So, to be able to smell them burning.
Yeah, the next day there was a mason by the name of Dawson came here and scooped up the ashes, him and his brother, and they brought him down to the local graveyard here at the time, which was known as the Mullarn. So they brought the remains down there, and Father Murphy's head was brought down to what would be down the Catholic Church. It was actually an alleyway. The archway is still there to this day. It's now incorporated into a house now, but that's where the head was placed. It was there for several months before his sister came up from Wexford and brought the head back to Ferns. So in Ferns Old Cemetery, you'll find the Murphy family tomb, and there's a mention of Father Murphy's remains being buried there as well. So there's always a bit of a dispute between Ferns and Tullow over where Father Murphy's remains are buried, but it's generally accepted that his head was brought to Ferns and his ashes are still in the Mullarn.
Okay.
So this is where it happened here.
After Father Murphy's body was burnt in a barrel of pitch, his head was taken down Mill Street and impaled on a spike opposite the Catholic Church in Tullow as a warning to others. This was an old alleyway.
It's now incorporated into the building space now. The next day after the burning, his ashes were collected by two brothers known as the Dawsons. They brought the ashes down here to the Mullarn, which is the old cemetery here for Tullow. There's no marker we don't know exactly where he's buried in the cemetery. Now, there was a memorial put up here in 1998 to basically commemorate the fact that his ashes were placed in the Mullarn, but where exactly we don't know. Here's the memorial here. This is it. That's where I went to school.
Next, we're going to Tullow Museum, and I'm going to show you Father Murphy's original vestments. How's it going? How are you?
Just coming in here, looking for the Father Murphy vestments.
Oh, very good. And down there, there's a light over the fire extinguisher there.
Okay.
You have to hold it down because the light is damaging the vestments a little bit.
Yeah, I understand.
They weren't invented for that kind of thing.
And the chalice, was the chalice found with him, or was that just brought from relations, or?
I think that's brought from relations. I think it was his sister that would have been responsible for a lot of this.
That was all different parts, different videos, different stories there. This one is
The 1798 rebellion officially ended in October that year. However, some of the rebels kept the fight alive for the succeeding years. One of those men was Michael Dwyer, who launched a guerrilla campaign in West Wicklow. Dwyer narrowly survived the battle on a snowy day in Derry-in-the-Muck, County Wicklow on the 15th of February 1799, after Sam McAllister sacrificed himself to save Dwyer's life. I'm going to show you the site of the battle in Derry-in-the-Muck, and Colum is going to tell us the story of what happened that day. Here on the left, is it?
Yeah.
Grand. Jeez, that's some view.
To a kill. This is the Glen of Imal. The army went on up down there. You can hear the army shells at night time. Around the echo and around the mountains.
Jesus. I didn't know they had a base up here actually.
Yeah, cool money can. So yeah, I'll get some grasp where we are now. This is the Glen of Imal. This is what you call Dwyer country.
Dwyer country?
Dwyer country. Now on the 15th of February, the rebel force under Michael Dwyer came up here. These are the cottages. These are the cottages, or I believe that's the cottages, or the houses here, where some of the Dwyer gang were staying. So the Dwyer gang were staying in around here. These would have been the Hoxie family. You know, the Hoxie family, the Ash family. The cottage we're going to is actually Connell's cottage.
Okay.
And they're safe houses for Dwyer faction. And an informer had gone to William Hume Steele, the local magistrate in Kiltegan, which is a few miles away from here. And he informed them that Dwyer's gang were staying up here. So he went to Hackettstown, and there was a unit of Glengarry Fencibles who were staying stationed in Hackettstown, which is several miles away, and it's some feast because night time, every snowfall, these guys made their way up here. And the rebels were caught unaware in these houses here. Some of them were executed, some escaped eventually afterwards. But they made their way up here to Miley Connell's cottage, and Dwyer was staying up here with Sam McAllister and two other men by the name of Costello and Savage, and they were caught unawares of what was happening down here. So the Glengarrys surrounded the house, they set the thatch on fire, and a siege occurred where it was a hopeless position for them. The roof was burning over their heads. Costello and Savage were killed, and Sam McAllister received a gunshot to the arm, breaking his arm. Now this was night time. The place was illuminated with fire, surrounded, and Dwyer was pretty much feeling he was in a hopeless position. And McAllister, who was a deserter from the Antrim militia, he joined Dwyer's gang, basically sacrificed himself for Dwyer to live. He went to the doorway, he went straight to the doorway. The Glengarrys opened fire and killed McAllister.
Okay.
And that allowed Dwyer the time to escape while he reloaded the muskets. So he escaped. He received one shot to his body, but he survived. He went up into the hills to his granduncle's house, and he remained there. He actually fell ill for a little while afterwards. He fell ill because he was practically naked, escaping up into the mountains, freezing cold temperatures, heavy snow, and he wasn't involved in any of the insurrection for a few months afterwards, but then he came back and he was involved in. But we're up the house here now, but you can see how dusty it is. It's
Jeez, you're fairly out in the sticks out here, right?
imagine 200 years ago, we wouldn't have had even the roads in here.
Yeah.
Cattle tracks. Well, okay, kind of the room. So Michael Dwyer was born on 1772 nearby in the Glen of Imal. We're in the Glen of Imal right now, and he was a United Irishman. He had a lot of friends, relatives who were involved in United Irishmen around here. What spurned on Dwyer was what happened a few miles away in Dunlavin on the 24th of May 1798, when the massacre at Dunlavin Green occurred, and there was just so much paranoia around here, there was so much fear that the whole rebellion erupted around here, and basically the war came to them. Dwyer, after the execution of his relation at Dunlavin, ended up going to Wexford. He fought in the Wexford Rebellion in 1798. He fought at the Battle of Vinegar Hill. He made his way up to Wicklow with the largest force of the insurgents that split after the Battle of Vinegar Hill. He was an asset for the rebel army in the sense that he knew this area like the back of his hand. He knew who to go to safe houses such as here. And when the rebel army decided to go into Meath, into the Midlands, he decided to stay here. He said the fight was better off in an area that you knew. He remained here, between here in the Glen of Imal and just over the mountain in Glenmalure. So basically Dwyer and his group orchestrated a guerrilla campaign which in effect lasted for 5 years until December 1803. And here at Derrynamuk, one of the greatest well-known episodes of Dwyer's guerrilla campaign, this is one of the most famous incidents. On the 15th of February 1799, at that period there was a serious clampdown by the militia and yeomanry on these areas. Every so often there'd be a net thrown in around the area to try and capture Dwyer and his men. So here at Miley Connell's cottage, Dwyer, McAllister and two men by the name of Savage and Costello were sleeping here that night. It was heavy snowfall. Just down the Boreen at the Tools cottage and the Hoxie cottage, there were several other members of the Dwyer faction. An informer had gone to the local magistrate, William Hume Steele, and informed him of Dwyer's whereabouts. He in turn went to the commandant of the Glengarry regiment that were stationed in the village of Hackettstown, several miles away from here. Heavy snowfall, in darkness, the Glengarrys made their way across and they surrounded the cottages down the end of the Boreen and they captured the men down there. The men up here were caught unaware. The Glengarrys surrounded the cottage, set the thatch alight, and all of a sudden the men were caught inside. After a shootout, Costello and Savage were killed. McAllister was badly wounded. He knew that he'd holed up Dwyer in an attempt to escape. He went to the door, he threw himself out through the door, and the Glengarrys opened fire. The muskets, generally taking 30 seconds to reload, didn't realise they'd missed a chance to kill Dwyer. Dwyer, on McAllister being killed, or sacrificing himself we should say, made his way up this hill, and as the story goes, he slipped on a flagstone. As the Glengarrys opened fire, he slipped on a flagstone, and as he fell, the shots went over his head. He only got a slight injury, and he made his way up over these hills to his granduncle, Taddy Dwyer, and there he recuperated for several months before lodging himself back into the insurrection. The house was restored in the 1930s by the OPW, and it's no longer known as Miley Connell's cottage. It's now known as the Dwyer McAllister cottage.
Sam McAllister sacrificed his own life to give Michael Dwyer a chance to escape, and McAllister was later buried in Kilranilla graveyard. This is Sam McAllister's grave. That's a crappie grave.
That's a crappie grave, yeah. There were two brothers that came up here looking for the army. I can send you a picture of that. It is still on us. Two of the most well-known names in Wicklow are in Glenmalure, and that's Michael Dwyer and Wilfia O'Byrne.
The next stop is the rebel camp at Glenmalure and the house of two United Irishmen, Pierce and Philip Harney.
So this store was put up in 1988. Remember it? Those from mid-Wicklow, western mid-Wicklow, who's basically carried out the guerrilla war against the British forces here for 5 years. So here you can see prominent names. You see Michael Dwyer, Joseph Holt, John Myrna, William Young. He was a United Irishman who was actually executed in Carlow in late May 1798. Patrick Grant, he was executed in Wicklow, I believe. Arthur Devlin, he went to New South Wales with Dwyer. John Myrna went to New South Wales. Joseph Holt went to New South Wales. Hugh Vestey-Byrne went to New South Wales. And Martin Burke, John Harmon, he went to America. We have, who else do we have? We have Sam McAllister, who was killed at the siege of Derrynamuk. And as it says, there's many, many more. And Dwyer had a combined crew, I'd say, of about 30 to 40 men over the space of the 5 years. Different men came and went. And of course, also it's important to mention the role of the women as well, like Michael Dwyer's wife, Mary, who often would have visited Michael at his times down here in Wicklow. She was based in Dublin, I believe, during the time of his period in here. Interesting as well is while on the run here in Wicklow, Dwyer actually got involved with the Emmet uprising. Not so much that he didn't fight in the uprising, but he was to lead the Wicklow men into Dublin if Emmet had succeeded. Now he didn't succeed, and it was one of the main reasons why Dwyer eventually surrendered later that year in December. He surrendered to William Hume down in Humewood Castle in Ketegan, on condition that he'd hopefully be sent to America, but of course he was sent to Australia after a brief period in Kilmainham jail. Dwyer went to Australia. He was granted land in the southern regions of both Sydney, near Liverpool, along with Devlin and Martin Burke and Hugh Vestey-Byrne. And they carved out good lives for themselves over there. Just Dwyer fell on hard times, unfortunately. He was prone to drinking. Ill health then as well took over. It's eventually caught up in him in 1825, and he died after being held in debtor's prison. He died from ill health and dysentery. He's buried now in Waverley Cemetery in Bombay. So you can see why they chose to come to Glenmalure. It's very desolate. It's desolate now in 2024. You can imagine what it was like in 1798. The rebel army, after the fall of Wexford, they came here to Glenmalure to recuperate, to just get away from the Crown forces that were coming up behind them. Knew it would have been very hard for British forces to manoeuvre around here as well, so they came in here. They spent several weeks in here as a bit of a field hospital, and just to relax. If you can say such a word, you can say relax. But came in here as a break, and stayed here for a good few weeks. Dwyer was actually known as the Governor of Glenmalure, that was his nickname. And he remained here while the rest of the rebel army went to fight in the Midlands. They got obliterated in the Midlands. And Miles Byrne also stayed here as well, alongside him. It was here Miles Byrne heard the news of what happened in the Midlands. He got told about his uncle being badly wounded and another uncle being killed near RD, County Louth. And Byrne remained here for the summer of '98 before moving up to Dublin later that year. Joseph Holt also decided to throw in his rag, and he made an agreement with the government to go to New South Wales. He went aboard the ship, the Minerva, and he arrived in New South Wales a few years before Dwyer went to work with Lieutenant Cherry in 1805, along with Arthur Devlin and a few of his other comrades mentioned here. So here's the
gable right there.
Yeah, this is the Harney homestead. This was Philip and Pierce Harney's home in 1798. They were United Irishmen. I'm pretty sure this would have been the house where Joseph Holt, Michael Dwyer, Miles Byrne, and everyone else involved would have planned out what they were going to do next, whether they were going to raid Aughrim or Athlone, or what would happen if the British Crown forces came in. I'm sure the rebel leadership actually would have stayed in this house. This is the townland of Barravore,
okay.
And this is the area where the rebels would have camped here in 1798, all along the trail. Beside the river as well, so it's perfect shelter. Not from the elements, as you can see, but it's fairly deep, well within the valley. That if they knew if government forces were coming, they'd have enough time to get across up to the head of this valley, which leads you into Glendemal. Glendalough is just up here. Just first.
Glendalogh's at the other side.
Yeah, Glendalough is just right over that slope. And that goes that way. So it's like two valleys collide with each other. So this is the memorial for Philip and Patrick Lacey. They lived around here. They were killed at this bridge on the way back from Vinegar Hill on the 21st of June. I honestly do think it was probably a day or two later, because the trek from Enniscorthy to here is a bit of a distance for two men to be walking on foot. But they were killed by the local yeomanry, and they're buried locally in Prebin Cemetery. The headstone is still there. So this memorial is to commemorate them.
What is it?
Broken.
Okay.
That's the Wexford border. Carlow is to the left of it. Town of Gorey is right behind it. And the rebels were camped just at the back. And they marched over this way here, and they basically ambushed the Calatin and Culcano yeomanry just up the road there. The yeomanry fled back down to this house over here. You can still see the slate facade in front of it, and the facade of the house still has the markings of bullet holes from that day.
There's still bullet holes in it?
Yeah, the rebels besieged it, surrounded it, and in some cases some of the rebels got mattresses, straw mattresses, and used them as cover to go up and storm the house, but they were shot down. And here's the memorial to it. I do love the writing on it, the First War of the Republic.
First War of the Republic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was the 2nd of July 1798. Same day, Father Murphy was only killed 15 minutes away.
At Humewood Castle on the 14th of December 1803, Michael Dwyer surrendered to Captain of the Yeomanry, William Hume, and therefore ended the guerrilla campaign. After his spell in Kilmainham jail, Dwyer was deported to New South Wales in Australia, and on the 23rd of August 1825, at the age of 53, Michael Dwyer passed. His grave is in the Waverley Cemetery in New South Wales, Australia.